And the stream. There we go. Hey, everybody, I'm learning here. And I've got Ken Wallace is teaching me how to do this. And that's operator error because he taught me perfectly how to do that without running it from YouTube or Vimeo. And I hit the wrong button. I hadn't added myself. Anyway, I love Streamyard. I really, really am digging this program. And I appreciate Ken helping me out with it. And so all is good. Glad you're here. How's your Sunday? Been good for Tammy and me. You know, it's so different to we attend a church here in Las Vegas called Verve, and it's so different to attend church online. But we have been doing that every Sunday. You know, getting up and getting a nice coffee, and what a world we live in. You can take something on your phone and project it on the screen of your television, and your TV is bigger than it's ever been, right? So we're sitting here. It's almost an immersive experience, and we're attending church. And the funny thing is, somebody I went to high school with back in Crothersville, Sue Nay Hooker, is happened to be watching. Now her son from Crothersville ended up attending our church in Las Vegas. So it's really kind of cool. She posted there, and I said, "Hey, Crothersville graduate, you don't expect when you're in a graduating class as small as ours was, that you're going to be running into somebody online watching a Vegas church service." So that was pretty cool. The minister, Vince Antonucci, is just a remarkable thinker and speaker. I mentioned before that the series that we just ended today is called Reboot. And it started on Easter, right, as a time to relaunch and rethink and reboot. And he was going through the Control-Alt-Delete. My pal Mitch Joel wrote a book called Control-Alt-Delete. But it's take control of what you can. And alt means look for alternative ways, better ways of doing things. And delete, which was the topic today, is something I've talked about here before. You know, what are we learning that we need to delete from our lives? And what are we learning through this that we could eliminate and make better for the future? I'll bet you there are things that you have noticed because of the situation. Man, we all have our challenges with what we're going through right now. I mean, there's no doubt about it. We all have our challenges with what's happening and what we're going through right now. And you know, it's difficult and it's challenging and it's tragic. But at the same time, part of what we have to understand is that it's a learning opportunity for us as well, right? I mean, we can learn from this. And one of the things that he was talking about that I thought was so good in terms of what we can delete is, boy, there are things we can delete from our lives. And one of the things that we've learned that we can delete is Tammy and I eat out too much. I mean, we eat out all the time. And we do that because we love eating out and we love the servers that we are friends with and all that kind of good stuff. But simultaneously, you know, we're spending more money than we'll be spending. And it's really, really created a challenge. So that's part of what we're focused on is what can we delete? And that was what he was talking about. So that is all good. Hey, Martin, so good to see you. I hope you're doing great. Wherever I'm assuming you're home across the pond, so to speak. But hope you're doing great wherever you are in the world today. Also, I see on Facebook there are some hellos that we're getting that aren't posting for some reason. So Dana, I can't get it up on the screen. I don't know why it's not going through. But Dana, great to see you. And Charles, is always great to see you. So one of the questions I guess I'd ask you right now is what can you delete? What things are there in your life that you think, gosh, I could get rid of that. I could ease off from that. Part of what he talked about today was for those in Vegas. Have you noticed gambling. And one of the problems if you live here in Vegas, by the way, it's not that you're going out dropping thousands of bucks while you're gambling at any particular time. It's that there's slot machines at the grocery stores, or the best restaurants are in the casinos. So you end up maybe losing $100. But if you do that once a week, you spent $400 that month poking it down a machine. And so you have to think about that. And so those are some of the things that he was talking about that I thought was so good and worth mentioning here today as well. Is what are you going to take control of? What alternate approaches can you find? And are there things that you can delete? And I think through this crisis, through this process, we will note that there are many things, in fact, that we can delete. Dwayne, I see on Facebook, for some reason it's not posted up here in my comments section. I don't know why on the program, but let's see here. Why is this doing that? Facebook groups. Visit StreamYard.com/Facebook if it's not coming through. Maybe we'll have some more info on that for you shortly. StreamYard, make your streams public. You need to make your streams public on Facebook. Interesting. Looks like I'm not doing that, but that's from groups, not from Facebook profiles. Let's see here. Is this not public? I don't know what I'm doing wrong here, but I will get that checked out and see what's going on, because I really, really love posting up what everybody is doing here, because that's really cool. And thank you, by the way, for sharing. If you'll share this, that would be great. Hi to Geraldine watching on Instagram. So some good news too, by the way, that we've got. You're not coming up on my iPad, but I'm coming up on your iPhone. Phil Sorrentino just wrote. That is the craziest. Let's see here. It's set to public. I don't know. Phil, I got to check this out. We got to figure out what's going on here. So we'll get this fixed by tomorrow. But hey, what I did want you to know as well is that we do have our Facebook page set up. I mentioned this yesterday, all set with that. So all you need to do is search on Facebook for Daily Distinction, and you can sign up there on the Facebook page, which is very cool. So check that out. Daily Distinction. And starting today, what we have done, by the way, if you have been involved with UBS, the Ultimate Business Summit, we have moved this. You can only be on 5 streams at one particular time. So we've moved from the UBS Insiders page to the Daily Distinction page. So if you've been watching on the UBS page, it will not be there anymore. It will be moved over to our Daily Distinction Facebook page. So all you need to do is just search on Facebook for Daily Distinction, and you can sign up for our Daily Distinction Facebook page. And it gives us more of a chance to interact as well. Yes, Jerry, technology is challenging. All the above. I don't know how Martin's thing got through, and that's the only one that's showing right now, which is just absolutely crazy. I don't know. Let's see. No, there's just nothing. Some destinations won't get comments. I'm looking here online as we're doing this. If you're watching on my Facebook profile, it says just make sure it's set to public, and it is. So I don't know. So yes, technology is challenging us. I love being able to post your comments. So that's why we switched from Ecamm over to Streamyard, was the ability to do this. So we'll get this figured out, because I certainly like posting your comments. Hey, one other thing before I get to something I want to make sure I talked about today, and that is the fact that tonight is the night. The Ken and Glenn show with a guy named Scott is at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 o'clock Pacific time. And it is Ken Walls and it is Glenn Morshower of 24 Transformers and the Resonance fame. We get together, and I'm waiting on confirmation, but we may have a very, very cool guest tonight. So I got to check that out. That is going to be absolutely fantastic. So make certain to check into Ken and Glenn and a guy named Scott. Hey, Jeff Weimer, good to see you. Glad you are here. And Dwayne, yes, you're so right. Isn't it amazing how when software gets updated, it messes up everything. Yeah, it's just crazy. We try to, yeah, Charles, always something fun to deal with. It's crazy that you can make a little change in your software. Oh, we're going to improve it. We're going to make it better. Look out, because it's not going to work. That's the point that it goes crazy. There's so many things that are going on right now, and so many things that are out there. I wanted to take just a minute and talk about how do we determine what's true or not? How do we determine, how do we make our own personal judgments on whether or not we can believe a particular source or not? I don't know about you, but I get so many messages on Instagram and so many messages on Facebook and so many messages on LinkedIn, and I see so many tweets. And some of them you just kind of go, how does anybody believe this? And then you see 50 people have liked it and 20 people have commented, go getting that. And regardless of what your position is on any issue, whether we're talking about politics or religion or what's going on with COVID-19, no matter what your position is, please don't misunderstand, I am not trying to suggest to you what your position should be, but I do think we need to be all a little bit more discerning about what's out there and what the truth is. Okay. So how do we begin to think about, and I saw a great quote this morning. It says, when it comes to thinking, most people don't. I thought that was pretty good. When it comes to thinking, most people don't, right? I'm guilty of it. I've done it. I see something that looks interesting on Facebook or Twitter, and I've retweeted things, I've reposted things. And then I think, oh gosh, why did I do that? It's just crazy. So I went and I started looking to see what I could find about what do historians, or what do people that have to determine, what really happened and what didn't happen, what are some of the rules that they use to determine whether something happened or not? One of the things I was interested in is, I'm as a person of faith, I'm just kind of interested in what historians say they can prove that actually happened in ancient times, as opposed to, what we believe to be true because it's been said over and over. Or, when it comes to the Roman Empire, what about that we can prove happened, as opposed to part of what was the lore, what was the myth, because the emperors were so revered, right? So what really what standards can we use to determine what the truth is? Mark on Instagram just posted, yeah, facts are no longer welcome. That seems to be the case to some degree, doesn't it, Mark? So what I found is historians really look at three particular aspects. And so let me do them in reverse order, because the third one, the first one I'm going to tell you is the third place. In other words, it's of the three, it's the least important. Okay, so here's number three: eyewitnesses. Is somebody writing it because they were actually there? Is what they're posting or what they're writing about, even back to ancient times? Were they there? Because the assumption is an eyewitness has a more accurate accounting than someone who was told about it, who's told about it, who's told about it. I mean, have you noticed on Facebook how many posts that, my wife works with a woman and her cousin is married to a doctor who says, right? So the farther away we get from eyewitness, the more we should question whether or not it's true. So eyewitnesses have more credibility than those who are writing about it, who've heard about it from someone else. And an important aspect of that is the more eyewitnesses that there are, what you look for is where their stories are the same. Okay? So if you have multiple eyewitnesses, they may disagree on some things, but if you have multiple eyewitnesses saying that this happened and their stories, collaborate, police officers look for that during an accident. If you've got three eyewitnesses and all three say, this car was left of center, then a great degree of credibility is given to that. Multiple eyewitnesses where their stories jive. Okay? That's number three. Number two, corroborated by independent sources. In other words, if something is attested to by someone who has no skin in the game, that is given a great deal of validity, right? That is given a great deal of validity. So, for example, it's really hard, and I don't mean this from a religious perspective in the least. I don't mean that at all. I mean this in terms of how historians who aren't concerned about what your religious beliefs are, they're just concerned about, did this happen? It's why historians mostly, by a huge majority, agree, for example, that Jesus actually lived, because there are a couple of other in Roman history examples of writings of historians who talked about the early Christians and who talked about in one place about Jesus. So the historians, by a vast majority, agree that he actually lived, even though this happened over 2,000 years ago, right? So why do they know that? Because it's corroborated that aren't Christians, that have no skin in the game other than telling you what happened in that particular part of the world at that particular time, right? So is it corroborated by independent sources? So if somebody says something and it's validated by that's why polls are so important, right? Polling is so important because you can say we talked to a sample of X number of people, and here's the results of that poll. Now, are polls always perfect? No, they're not. They're not perfect in predicting the future, because we've seen that from presidential elections, but they are very accurate, interestingly enough, on assessing what we believe about the past. There was an article a while back in The Economist that said the most accurate predictor of the economy are polls about how do you feel right now about the economy. And if people feel positive about the economy at this moment, then the chances are over the next period of time, the next quarter or so, that the economy will be good. People feel good, going to be good. People feel bad, going to cut back on their spending. Economy in the future is going to be bad. So polling is more accurate in terms of our assessment of the past and how we feel than it is a prediction of the future, but it's pretty good at predicting the future if you got a good sample. So corroboration by independent sources is number 2. Here's number 3. Clues of bias. Very interesting. And there's 2 aspects to the clues of bias. When someone states something, if they also are aware of and give credence to a disagreeing opinion, then it adds more weight to what they're saying. Does that make sense? So in other words, if I say, I believe that this is a cup of coffee. Now I realize that some of you think a cup has a handle on it and is ceramic. However, for me, this is a cup of coffee. That adds proof to what I'm saying, because I'm acknowledging that there's some people out there that may not believe what I believe, and that's okay, but for me, this is that, right? So that's what we're talking about there, about you bring multiple perspectives into the discussion. Important, right? But here's the most important part of it. Is there a lack of benefit from the statement? Again, to use the historical example, not trying to be religious here, but with the historical example, is historians are almost unanimous in agreeing that Jesus came from Nazareth. It's said in the Bible, Jesus of Nazareth. It is said in other independent sources that a man from Nazareth, right? So why do you believe that? Because Nazareth was such a small town, not even mentioned in many of the Roman histories that we still have to this day that were recorded in that era. The town is so small, it wasn't even mentioned. There's nothing for Christians or non-Christians to gain by saying that he came from Nazareth. See what I mean? I mean, there's nothing that can be gained by saying that he came from a small town nobody ever heard of. If they would have said he was from Jerusalem, then that would give weight and power to his birth because he was born in this incredible city. Or, everybody knew that from the first talking about him that he came from Nazareth. That's where he grew up. He came from Nazareth. What was he? One translation says carpenter. Another translation of that same word is someone who worked with her hands. So at any rate, he was a laborer. He was someone who, who used his hands to build things in this small town. Okay, he wasn't born of wealth, right? It does them no good to say, there's nothing to be gained by saying he was a carpenter. He was a common laborer, right? If they would have said he was born a genius and never worked and always, there's something to be gained by that, right? But there's nothing to be, so even those who don't believe, even those historians who are of another religious faith or who are non-believers will say, historically speaking, the fact that he came from Nazareth, the fact that he was a carpenter or a laborer must be true, because there's nothing to be gained by either side saying that. So what I'd like for you to do, for example, is to think about when you see these questions about where we are right now and what we're going through right now. All I'm asking you to do, all I'm asking everyone to consider are those 3 points. Number one is what they're saying. Do they have eyewitness to it? Are they able to really see? Have they seen something? Okay, chances are we probably haven't, right? So, okay, if that hasn't happened, second, is what they're saying corroborated by independent sources? In other words, is that particular point they're making agreed upon by people with whom they might disagree? Is that particular point they're making corroborated by an independent source? Now, for example, if I was to say, the most important thing about any meeting is your professional speaker. And by the way, Larry Winget, Joe Calloway, Mark Sanborn, and Randy Pennington, they all agree with me. What would you think of that statement? Well, first of all, of course that's what I do. That's what I do for a living. Certainly I would say that's the most important thing. But to pick other speakers and use them as my source to prove it's true is ridiculous, because all I'm doing is picking people that would agree with me. So we have to look for independent, if we really want to see what's true and get out of the echo chamber of just hearing that's the second thing we do. But the third thing is, what's to be gained? I mean, what's to be gained? I see. So, I mean, look, at the end of the day, probably the last 2 things that are going to be opened back up are concerts and big meetings. Sporting events may be in there somewhere, right? But concerts and big meetings. So my best pals, their livelihood depends on the concert business. And other of my best pals and my livelihood totally depends on, are there meetings? Conferences, conventions. So if I get on here and say, man, this thing, we got to open everything up and start having meetings right now. Let's start having meetings. You would have a right to say, well, of course you're going to say that. You got skin in the game. That's how you get paid. Why wouldn't you be saying that? Because you are feeling economic pain from those decisions. Of course you would be against that, because you are saying that for your own benefit. I mentioned here before that we have had a family member with dealing with addiction. And one of the things in rehab is they say, play out the string. Whatever you're going to do, play out the string. So if you're sober and you're going to use again, before you use again, just play out the string. What's going to happen? You're going to get addicted again, and you're going to steal from your parents again, and you're going to have relationship problems again, and you're going to be dependent. Before you do it, just play out the string. And so part of what I'd ask you to do is to think about playing out the string. Okay. What happens if we don't go back? I mean, people will lose their jobs. Businesses might close. Play out that string. If we do go back, what might happen? More people get sick. We have to go through this again. We have other. I'm not trying to tell you what to think. That is not what I'm trying to do. But what I am suggesting is that, as I said earlier, when it comes to thinking, most people don't. and I would hope that all of us who are here as a part of this are better than that. Play out the string. Ask yourself, have they seen this? Are they an eyewitness to it? Chances are probably not. Second, is what they're saying corroborated by independent sources? And by the way, just like we're better off with multiple eyewitnesses, we're also better with multiple independent sources. So don't just say, hey, I heard this on. And by the way, the source isn't that somebody told me that they heard that someone said, right? I mean, show your work. Show your work. Quote the source. And finally are there clues of bias? Are they willing to admit that people might disagree with them and that their disagreement is really valid? And also it's worth asking, where's the benefit? Because if you say something that doesn't benefit you, then the chances are it's what you really mean and what you really believe. It gives more credence to that. It gives more weight to that. So by evaluating those three, we really get to a better place in terms of where we can find truth and what is being put out there, because people, our minister mentioned this morning. They did a survey of just people, the general public, right? It wasn't limited to any particular religious faith or denomination, or just general public. And they asked them what was their favorite Bible verse. And number one most cited was John 3:16. The second most cited was God helps those who help themselves. That isn't in the Bible. It's not. It's a saying, but it's not in the Bible. So in other words, the second most favorite Bible verse is a verse that isn't in the Bible, but they thought it was, right? And they convinced themselves it was. There are things about people saying, the government can't tell you where to go or what to do. Then explain to me how come my dad and other members of my family got drafted. If the government can't tell you where to go and what to do, how in the world did we ever have a draft, right? So part of what we have to do is to just think for a little bit. Again, I'm not saying that your position or my position is wrong or it's right or whatever, but it's just something we need to consider in these changing and challenging times. Hey, listen, my tang got tangled there. Lasagna, I am so sorry, but thank you. I really appreciate you saying that. Thank you. And Diane, thank you very much for that. You bet. I wish I could post it up here. I don't know why we aren't able to do that today. So, hey, we got some great guests coming this next week. We're waiting on confirmation for a couple of them, but I promise you that we are going to have big fun this week with some of the guests that we've got coming up. And I'll remind you too of a couple things. If you'd like to hear more, and it's not during the 30 minutes that we're on here, all you need to do is just go to your Amazon device and say ALEXA. I won't say it because I know when I do, it triggers mine in here. And I've heard from people who said, you said that word that triggered mine in my house. So say ALEXA, open Distinction Radio, or play Distinction Radio. And you'll hear 24/7 from our radio station called Distinction Radio. So that's there. And please remember, the show, Ken and Glenn with a guy named Scott, is on tonight at 8 o'clock. The other thing is, I would love for you to go to our Facebook page and sign up. We'll continue the conversation there as we go. And as always, for the resources that we have in terms of the 14-day audio program and everything else we got going on, it is all right there at distinctionnation.com, distinctionnation.com. Hey, that does it for me for today. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you again tomorrow at 3 o'clock Eastern, noon Pacific, with our next edition of Daily